Good morning. This is Charlotte Ann Adams. We're going to go ahead and get started. I am with Sterling Seacrest Pritchard. We are a solutions-oriented risk management firm. We are headquartered in Atlanta. We have offices as far west as Little Rock, as far east as Savannah, and as far south as Tampa. We have about 320 employees across the Southeast. We do seek solutions. We are not just risk management insurance placement firm. We get involved with our clients. We ask the questions about what exposures are there, but also we look to see how we can help a company overall, whether it be with talent retention or in this case with buttoning up a risk management program on the cybersecurity side. So we are fortunate to partner with Clearwinds. We are each other's clients, and Clearwinds is based in Birmingham, Alabama. We have the president with us that's going to present, and there are well over 100 years in experience in the cyber world combined that you're about to listen in on. If you have questions, you guys can put that in the comment section. We are going to open it up for a Q&A at the end of the presentation, and we'll go ahead and introduce Stan Sargent, president of Clearwinds.
Well, thank you. Thank you guys for joining. And yes, I'm Stan Sargent, president of Clearwinds, and we just had some things we wanted to talk to you about, some things that we've seen and some things of how to prevent fraud and those kind of things. So I'll get going. And I'm going to kind of present a couple of scenarios that have happened to some of our clients. I think one of them was not with one of our clients, but wanted to kind of go through those and kind of see what those possibilities that could happen. And then Michael Gray, he is a CISSP, which is a security professional that works for Clearwinds, and he is going to go through some things that you can do and just some issues that have been seen out there. So and some solutions. So anyway, let's see. Hold on one second. There we go. All right, so some fraud. So I just kind of want to start off with some examples of fraud that we have seen with some of our clients, and yeah, really these are kind of more of the scary scenarios where things have not gone well. So this first example, so we had one of our clients, a distribution company. So the scenario is they've got IT staff, and they do kind of what I would kind of consider the basics for security. So firewall to protect them from the internet, antivirus on all the computers to make sure viruses aren't getting on their computers and stuff. They were doing a backup, however, it was on the same network. And we'll talk about why that was an issue here. So kind of what happened, one morning they came in, couldn't get access to their files, couldn't get access to their applications. So they called us, kind of determined pretty quickly that they had ransomware. This ransomware went across all their servers in their data center, and potentially a lot of their client computers too, that all the employees and stuff are using. So they end up pretty much having to kind of do a complete shutdown of their network. One thing that they did not have any kind of continuity security plan or an incident response plan that would allow just a plan for, hey, I got attacked. Let me see what I need to do. So it was a little bit chaotic. So what they ended up doing, they did not pay the demands, and that was they actually got the FBI involved. The FBI always says, do not pay the demand. And so for them, which is fine. The only problem was when we went back to their backups, their backups were also corrupted. So they didn't really have a lot to go off of. Fortunately, we found a backup that was kind of done more ad hoc that actually saved them, that was not corrupted. So they did lose several weeks of data. But anyway, through this whole process, it took, I mean, at least a month to kind of clean up their system, kind of get them back up and running. They spent a lot of money, as you see, yeah, like $250,000 in remediation, and really kind of a loss of time, for getting orders and those kind of things in. So pretty scary for them. This next one was $750,000 of fraud. So kind of what happened here, this site, they didn't have any IT staff. Again, basic security, they had, antivirus, they had firewall, but their email system got hacked. And so when that happened, what the hacker did was that they just monitored the email. And so, especially the CEO. So turned out that the client was about to buy a piece of property. So there was a lot of emails going back and forth about the property, and they so anyway, the hacker, I mean, he's just watching the emails flow back and forth. So anyway, so there's an attorney involved where they were kind of like, okay, basically ready to make a move on the property and buy it. The attorney asked, hey, are you going to send a wire or a check? And at that point, that's when he put himself into the conversation. So what he did was he got a domain and set up basically a false email and started conversing with that client. What he did was all the attorney's emails he forwarded to a folder that apparently the client never checked. So, and now he was the guy talking as the attorney to the client. So he basically says, they had decided on a wire. So he gave them, wiring instructions. Sure enough, they wired, $750,000 to an account, and within hours, that was sucked off to a foreign account. So it was kind of a total loss. I know they got the FBI involved on that one too, to see if they could kind of track and figure out who that was. But again, it's $150,000, out the door at that point. So anyway, so that is another pretty scary scenario that happened. This next one, the $45,000 that was a service company. They responded to a phishing campaign. They clicked on what was what they thought was a customer, and ended up it was not a customer. It turned out to be a Gmail account, but they didn't really look at the email that carefully. They were looking at the body, and it all kind of checked out from that standpoint, and they ended up sending basically $45,000 of materials off to actually a location in Texas. And sure enough, I mean, they went and checked. I mean, that stuff got dropped off there and then picked up within an hour, and nobody knew where that was. So again, FBI got involved, and nothing ever came of it. So the next one was a healthcare facility that actually got a phone call from a hacker and represented himself as a laboratory. They got the email of the person that they contacted. They started conversing through email and got them to send an ACH payment for supposedly some lab work and stuff. It was $16,000, and found out the next day that was a fraud. Again, kind of total loss there. So the next one here, I've got a couple that these were not necessarily money, but they got records. So this next one, again, healthcare facility. got 8,000 records compromised by again, a phishing campaign where they clicked on an email. It looked like it installed some sort of software which gave them control of that account. They were, I think at that point, able to get the like a logger that basically got their password to the EHR system, and then they were able to grab the 8,000 records that were there. So so that was not good for them. This last one, the 3,500 records, this was not one of our clients, but it was kind of an interesting story. So they found 3,500 records. It was on the dark web. Turned out that, from my understanding, this is another security company was kind of looking around the dark web, kind of found it, turned out to be one of their clients, just because they started recognizing some things that they thought they had seen. They approached them, kind of looked around. Sure enough, they had been compromised, and a lot of the records kind of matched up. I think he bought them for like $20, so off the dark web, which was not much, but he was able to kind of track that down. So so definitely some scary scenarios of things that happen to different companies. That can be that we need to protect against. Or even if something happens, there's definitely ways to go about it to minimize the disruption and the liability there. So anyway, I just want to present those. So I'm going to introduce Michael Gray. Like I said, he is our VP of engineering and our CSSP. Has a lot of experience in many many areas, a lot in healthcare too. So, but anyway, he's going to talk to you about some of the issues that you can find and some of the solutions and how to fix those. So, Michael.
Thank you,
Oh,
Stan.
hey,
Oh,
I forgot this one slide. This is just an interesting thing about this is a ransomware picture that came up on somebody's screen. Most of the time, you don't even see anything. You don't even know that you've been hit by ransomware. It's just nothing works for you. But this is one that actually put a splash screen up there, and saying, hey, you owe this amount of Bitcoin. Just kind of an interesting thing. So if you ever see something like that, you definitely need to need to take care of it. So anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Michael.
all right. Yeah, thanks, Stan. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, so as Stan has been alluding to some of the potential avenues of openings there around fraud, wanted to try to hone in on healthcare in particular and some of the issues that we see prevalent there. The first one there is a growing attack surface of the employee health record. It used to be all that was self-contained within the hospital itself, but with the Healthcare Act of '96 demanding that information be shared globally, this attack surface is now blossomed and makes access to these employee health records much more global. And so that's definitely an issue that has arisen because of that. And then partnership with this growing attack surface, you've got lack of interoperability. That is the various healthcare record systems trying to communicate with one another and with a global database that can be accessed all over the country and quite honestly around the world to look at the treatment of patients. So those are two pretty large areas of exposure that one needs to pay close attention to. And then in the healthcare, we also are dealing with legacy medical hardware and software. And that is the FDA and its approved solutions typically are a little behind the modern frontier, so to speak. And so you have, for example, older operating systems that we don't have adequate patching capabilities or things of that nature. Maybe the wireless components don't allow for adequate security and encryption that we're dealing with. So that has been an ongoing issue with healthcare, and it's still exists. They're making a lot of strides on improving that or shortening that window, but it's still out there. Patients handling medical data. So now we have not only the employee health record being accessible around the globe for physicians, you also have patients called patient portals that allow an individual to access their record themselves from anywhere. Again, it's an area of concern, both just accessing the data. What do you do if they print something and leave it on the counter, leave it in the trash, leave it where somebody else can pick that information up? So there are several issues around that in particular to be aware of. And as we've seen in some of these fraud cases, stolen healthcare data is valuable. It's valuable not only in real value of dollars, but you're also talking about the intangibles such as reputation of the institutions and their name. Lack of cybersecurity education and buy-in are some more issues. That's not necessarily just isolated to healthcare. We find that everywhere, but that is an issue of concern to be aware of and to look at of addressing. And then finally, the growing number of IoT devices. And an IoT device, just think of that as, and again, we're looking at the healthcare. You've got for infant monitoring, you have patient monitoring, you have vital signs monitoring, all kind of monitoring equipment that exists in our hospitals. So those devices aren't decreasing, they're only increasing. And so how do we deal with those? Next slide, please. Okay, and so here's healthcare and cybersecurity. We have another statistic that more than 90% of healthcare organizations have had at least one cybersecurity breach in the prior 3 years. This was as of 2020. So a lot of exposure based upon the reasons that we just identified in the first slide. However, we have good news. There's ways that we can mitigate each of these issues with the technology that exists today. And that's what we'll be talking about here over the next few slides. Yes, because one thing for sure, it's always the next person. You can rest assured that everyone is susceptible for these attacks. Doesn't matter size, location, the institution type, that doesn't matter. We're all susceptible to these potential attacks. So need to be prepared and on how to respond. And in addition to that, putting in the pieces and components that will help prevent, and if not prevent, significantly mitigate our exposure. So one question to always ask yourself is, well, how prepared are you? Are you ready? Next slide, please. And here are, we talked about some of the issues in healthcare. Now here are some of the areas that can lead us to that lack of preparation. And one of them is there's just no protection at all. We're in a mindset that I'm not big enough, I'm not valuable enough, whatever the thoughts are, but so we're not going to spend any money and we're not going to do anything. Not a good place to be, but there are some that follow that. The others is some of the attack mechanisms that are used: viruses, malware, ransomware. These are brought in from various ways, but those are definitely some of the components of the weapons of the attackers that are used. So out of date firmware and software. Probably one of the number one areas of exposure is not having systems patched properly in both of these areas. In the Microsoft world, the Windows world, there's updates every month. Now in healthcare, downtime is a challenge. So, but that's where we design systems that will allow for fault tolerance so that you can patch and remediate and protect yourself while also providing services to not only the organization, but to its customers, its patients. Phishing and spam email, and along with social engineering, those are some of the issues that Stan had mentioned earlier. Phone calls, somebody pretending to be someone they're not. Again, these spam emails, the phishing attacks, performing man in the middle impersonation. So people will respond quickly to try to give them what they're asking for, try to be polite and provide the information. But those are two of the bigger areas as well that we see being exploited today. Next slide. The wireless environment. Touched on that briefly regarding legacy equipment, but just making sure that the information that's transmitted on the wireless network is encrypted and secured, especially patient information. Lack of planning. That's not necessarily the same as no protection. This is just, well, I've got stuff out here. I've got a firewall. I have this other component over here, and I have some wireless environment, but there's no cohesive plan of integrating all that you have, and of responding to an incident of some sort. So that's another area to pay attention to. Lack of monitoring. Again, we've got some tools. You may have some tools in place, but they're not set up to transmit information to a central location for someone to analyze and review and make sure that nothing out of the ordinary is happening. And lack of password policies. Everybody struggles with passwords. They tend to like shorter, simpler, it's easy to remember, but you got to keep in mind, the shorter they are, the easier they are to be exploited. So we want to make sure we have some adequate password policies in place. And seeing here, because of the vulnerabilities that exist and some of the shortfalls that are out there, we're easy targets. Some of the best way we can invest in is educating to help address the social engineering and phishing attacks. But we're all relative easy targets, so we've got to put our hats on in a different way and say, hey, I've got to get myself prepared. Organizations continue to lack the cybersecurity awareness and utilize poor security practices. Again, probably the poorest practice, it is around password policies, but also could be lack of patching. But the thing is, just just not quite, don't have everything together and a systematic process in place to prepare us for and put us in the best position that we can be in. All right, next slide. So here are next we're going to talk through is a few of the components that we can put in place and some of the practices we can put in place that will help us tremendously. The one thing to consider or remember is the attacks for it to be successful, there has to be several steps that have to take place. As long as we can interrupt one of those, just one of them, then the likelihood of success is virtually eliminated. So as we look at the components, we look at our edge device, the firewall, the one that separates our trusted resources from the internet, the World Wide Web. Obviously, having one is highly recommended, and one that is what's referred to as a next generation firewall, so that it can provide protection against particular applications and their signatures to put us in a better position for today's environment, so that we can continue to do business with our applications, but yet have some intelligence around those that we want to keep out. And the firewalls need to also have various antivirus enabled on them, where they can look at the information coming in, detect anomalies off of signatures, and block the traffic there. Intrusion prevention, which we have on this slide down a few bullets below here. Most of the time we're going to have that embedded in our firewall, and again, having that prevention there at the perimeters, close to the edge as we can, to prevent those attacks, that information from even getting into the environment. Along with the firewall, so we talked about protecting there on the perimeter, but we also want to think about how we would use the firewalls to help protect us once something's inside. That's just having it set up properly with zones and various things of that regard to help us mitigate and minimize the spread of the exposure. We talked about the monitoring, lack of monitoring, as one of the issues to pay attention to. Well, that's where this next product, SIEM, Security, Identity, and Event Management product, comes into play. It will look through the logs. If we have all of our logs pointed to this, the Windows logs or switch logs or firewall logs, all the information that individuals could access, point all those logs to this particular piece of equipment right here, then it will review and analyze those logs and identify anomalies in the logging, and will, based on rules that someone sets up, will alert as to where those anomalies are, and that way somebody could take action against those sooner rather than later. Endpoint detection. Endpoint detection has become huge in helping to combat against risks. Typically, we were very concerned about the perimeter, and we still should be. However, with a lot of the issues that we've mentioned regarding the social engineering and phishing of that sort, once an endpoint gets infected, we need some tools that will help us there. Mentioned the building the firewall, where it will help and provide some mitigation of spread, but endpoint detection, which is will help us even before it gets out on the network. So endpoint protection uses both the combination of antivirus and detection and response. The EDR is the endpoint detection and response is the one preferred, where it can isolate the machine or endpoint from the network once a potential exposure has been identified by shutting off the network card. Therefore, we don't have to worry about an infected machine sitting on the network spreading its infection to other machines that it can reach. Once it's, again, an anomaly is detected, then we can identify various actions to take. Of course, one of the most recommended would be to isolate it from the network so further analysis can be done to it. But that has really become a crucial component in the security tool belt today is endpoint detection and response. And then security awareness training, keeping everybody aware that you have to be concerned about the various things. We can't assume any longer that everybody is trustworthy. We have to almost take the other approach that everybody's out to get me, and therefore I need to verify this. So making awareness available and providing it to our staff and ourselves and everyone that we can, so that they'll know how to practice and be safe and be around these types of attacks that are coming in. All right, next slide. Yeah, and there's a picture of a firewall, and it's, again, we want the good stuff in, keep the bad stuff out. So it's just a visual representation of the desired result. And again, that those can be achieved with the next gen firewalls we've talked about. All right, next slide. Here is a graphical view of that SIM I was speaking of. You can look at all the various items that these units can monitor and provide information on. Again, this device, just like any device, is only as good as it's configured, but when configured properly and the environment configured to utilize it, these pieces of data right here are superb in helping to identify potential events that we need to address. And again, you can just look through there. We could spend time looking at each one of these, but we've actually had a couple of incidents where these SIM devices have detected anomalies and enabled us to respond to those and prevent further action. And actually, so they're very, very valuable, very valuable in the security arena. Next slide. Talked quite a bit about endpoint protection. Here's just another slide on it. Again, one of the biggest differences between the typical antivirus and the more modern detection response is the endpoint detection response utilizes a little more of anomaly behavioral reviews than antiviruses, although the modern antiviruses do pretty good there. But the endpoint detection response will notify and take action upon whatever happens to be on or detected on the device. So a huge advantage over just a regular antivirus in our tool belt there to have. Okay, next slide. here's an example of a phishing email. And one of the things that a security awareness training would lead someone and help them to identify. The first thing you see there is an email, Stan Sargent. But if you look at the information there in the brackets, you'll find that it doesn't look like anything that would come from a Stan Sargent. Is that information there is highly different and unusual. So the first thing you'd want to look at is hey, that doesn't look right. And so best thing is to do in a situation like that is call Stan and whoever has sent you the email and validate what they're asking for. Another thing that the phishing attacks will do is, I spoke of that earlier, was urgency. They're stressing us to react quickly. You know, like it says quick reply. Hey, send me your cell number. I need to read you real quick. I need to get in touch with you. They don't want you to think about it. You know, they're wanting a quick response. So that could be another red flag if you're looking through an email. Is you're seeing an unusual sender address and you're seeing this urgent need, then chances are that's not a valid request. But again, security awareness training will help us identify these particular things to observe and to direct us in how to deal with those. Okay, next slide. And here's some of the ways that the training can do that. First thing is it can actually send these bogus emails to our staff to see how well they respond. You could handle it one of two ways. You could just do a blast before there's any training to see what your exposure is, or you could and you definitely would want to do these after your training to see what you may need to reinforce in topics of training. But sending out those invalid emails is a great tool to help. And part of that is you'll know who clicked on them and tried to open those up. So again, to gather some information from the individual to see what other education they need. Video training that will walk you through how to identify and how to look at stuff that's suspect. Then these next two are more for this IT type of staff, and that's logging, looking at the information trail that's left for just about everything that happens on the network or on the workstations and endpoints. Being able to look at those and identify something that seems odd, unusual in looking at those particular logs. If you're seeing requests to a certain address just happening over and over and over again repeatedly, chances are that's not good, and we need to investigate that further. And then remediation. What do you do when and if an event occurs? So being able to have the tools that you know what to do before it happens. After when it does, you're not in such a crisis that we're running around trying to figure out what to do. But the remediation, another important component of this training. All right, next slide. And password management, it's such an important one. It has its own slide here. We've talked about these a little bit earlier. The passwords today, they must be complex. And by that means at minimum 12 characters in length. You're looking at uppercase, lowercase, numbers, and some wildcard characters in there, ampersand, exclamation mark, something of that regard. Those are a must. Changing your passwords more frequently. Used to be you get a password and that's what you had unless you forgot it. Well, we need to start changing these things. 180 days would be absolute minimum. Really 90 days would be what's recommended going through and changing these passwords. And then this third item is really important, is setting up our policy so we don't use the same password over and over. Because changing our password to the same thing that it was is not quite as effective. That doesn't really help us much. So they need to be unique. And then not only unique, but we probably want to avoid Post-it notes that has our complex password on it. To help, I know those make it easier for us to remember what the password is, but it also allows those all around us to walk by and see our password, which could lead someone into your system, maybe not at your workstation, but they can log into any other system on the network using your credentials and do some bad stuff. And of course, you're the one that's going to look like it occurred to. So I want to make sure that we don't have any Post-it notes around. And then the bottom factor here we're looking at, the multi-factor, is something that's highly recommended for remote access and any accounts with elevated privileges, an administrator of some sort. And there's actually 3 factors in multi-factor: something you know, which is a password or PIN; something you have, which typically is a cell phone with an app on it, or it could be a fob with has a random password generation occurring on it, or it's something that you are. It's a biometric, where it's a retinal scan, whether it's a thumbprint scan. But the objective is to use more than just a password, but to have a second factor to use, again, making it a little more complicated to get into the environment. Typically what we're seeing today is these two noted here: something you know and something you have, utilizing a cell phone with software that will alert you when you're trying to log in, where you can approve or reject that. But multi-factor is something, again, that's highly recommended on those elevated accounts or remote access into the environment. All right, next slide. All right, then we've got some proactive stuff here, security assessments, because we asked the question at the very beginning: how prepared are you? Well, we're probably not going to know until we've had an assessment of some type that will help us identify our current security posture. And so these security assessments are essential in doing that. They will look at your password policy, look at the physical security of the systems, look at your your firewall, your patching policy processes, the firmware update process. It takes all of those components and evaluates those based on best practice, and gives you an idea of where we sit and today, and what we need to do to get from point A to point B. External penetration test is just one of the tools to help in a security assessment that will identify potential vulnerabilities that any externally facing systems have. For example, a web server. We talked about earlier, again, the patient's portal, where they can access their medical record. Well, if your healthcare system is on site, then you want to make sure that the appropriate web protection is in place from this exposure to the internet for the patients to access their data. So an external penetration test would help identify any areas that need to be strengthened up, in particular to like a website of some sort. But it also shows any ports that are open that we may want to pay attention to as well. So an external penetration test, again, will aid us in those assessments. And then the security continuity plan is what to do. How do we respond if there a breach occurs of some sort? What do we do? Again, you have the planning document already created that has the individuals involved, their roles, how are you going to recover, where are you going to recover, who are you going to notify, all of the details of that. How are you going to mitigate the environment? How are you going to clean it up and restore, bring everything back alive? So that documentation that you'd already have on the front end and that you have been reviewing at least annually, it's crucial in how to handle when something, the security event or incident occurs. Okay, next slide. And in addition to that security continuity plan, you need a rapid response team, somebody who you can get called at. So like that old adage, Ghostbusters, who are you going to call? Well, you need to have somebody available that if you get breached, that you can pick the phone up and get a hold of them quickly, because timing is essential. The sooner that we know a breach has occurred, that someone can get on site to try to find the entry point, the quicker that can be remediated, and hopefully the spread is minimized. So you need a good rapid response team. Stan had mentioned the second item about having backups that are off site. That's important primarily because the different location, when set up properly, can help us have that information compromised. Typically, most of our backup systems are Windows-based component using our credentials that are shared with other resources in the network. And so we're looking at a backup off-site. It's really, we want to make sure that access to that is different than anything on-site. And quite honestly, we need to make sure that our on-site backups are segregated as well. But just sort of a brick wall so that data, whatever's going on-prem, can't exceed the barriers there and touch our backups in an offsite location. So having that offsite and set up properly, it is again another essential component of recovering in the event of a breach, and having tools to assess. We talked about the rapid response team, and the tools that we need to look at to help us figure out what's going on. The SIM is one we looked at earlier, will help identify the points of exposure. Other network monitoring tools, analysis tools that will help identify what this is. Again, we're looking for the source of the attack first so we can remediate that. We're also looking at what type of attack is going on, so it helps us understand the possible spread, how it's spreading. So having the tools to assess these things, and then all of that used to help diagnose and remediate, which that's the end goal. Get the leak stopped, get it plugged up, get it cleaned up, and get everything back to normal. All right, next slide, please. Backup and recovery. We talked about the backup. Nobody really cares about backups so much, but they love recovery. They love restoration. So you want to make sure that the backup and the restore is evaluated and tested. One of the it is crucial in the recovery of particularly a ransomware attack. So usually when a ransomware attack occurs, there's two major options. One is you pay the fine, whatever they're asking, whatever the ransom is. The other is you do a wipe and restore. Well, you lose the option of wipe and restore if we haven't successfully tested the backup and recovery. Then we're forced to either A, lose everything, or B, pay the ransom. So you want to make sure that the backups are tested, getting that offsite data that's separate from the network, like we talked about, testing the recovery periodically, not just assuming that the backup is happening correctly, but actually being able to test that we can restore it. We certainly don't want the first time we're testing the restore to be done in the middle of an attack. So being able to test that, setting up schedules and plans to test those backups. And then the last one, it's making sure that the backups are completing. A lot of times we'll see, and by completing, I'm referring to everything's being backed up. Backup may actually show completed, but there's open files that it hasn't backed up. So we want to make sure that the backup is complete, that there's nothing that we didn't get backed up. Or if there is something that didn't get backed up, we looked at it and say, okay, yeah, I don't need that. That's okay. But we've at least evaluated it and looked to make sure that is a nice, complete backup. Okay, next slide. And the next, I'm going to turn this over to Stan, as he will review these particular security solutions as they relate to Clearwinds and how we can help you in addressing most of these issues that we've talked about. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Stan.
All right. Hey, thank you, Mike. So yeah, so some of the solutions, Mike has kind of already talked about these, but one of the things, like if you do get, hacked, well, I guess first thing you need to have a good security continuity plan that will really kind of, tell you what your current stance, and have, contacts in there about, who kind of manages, different parts of security, and, like, when you do have an incident, kind of part of this is like an incident response plan, your kind of business continuity plan, things like that. So, so you need to know, like, hey, if you do have an incident, who do you need to contact? From maybe your IT standpoint, who do you need to, if y'all need to communicate with the press, who's going to do that, and just a variety of things that that you need to have set, and then kind of a structure of kind of like, hey, what am I going to do? But if this happens to our company, then hey, here's my steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and just work down it, because like I mentioned, the very first one I gave you that where they got hit by ransomware, they had no plan, and I mean, they literally spent 2 or 3 days just very confused on kind of even what to do. So, so we were able to kind of help them through that process, but even with us, I mean, we've got an idea of probably what they need to do, but they still got to figure out, from an internal structure, communication and all that stuff. So that's a very key piece to, have that plan ready to go. The ability to have, tools that you can do some testing, and, make sure things are good is definitely necessary. So things like security awareness training that Michael mentioned, is kind of our last bullet here. But just things to, an external pen test. I know for a lot of our managed service customers, we do that quarterly for them, so that we can kind of take a look at it, those reports that come out, and just make sure everything's okay. And then having the right forensics tools, if you do have a problem, to be able to figure out what's going on and, kind of how to get back. Firewall is always important. You got to have some protection from the internet, that can really block a lot of attacks that could possibly, come into you. Obviously, the hackers, they figure out ways around it, but hey, you don't want to make it easy for them. So, system data security, that's always very important. Let me see if I've got. Okay. Yeah. So those things right there, I am going to, with the data security, I mean, if you can encrypt, information is always good. A lot of people have encryption on their laptops, so in case they get stolen or lost, the data is encrypted, and you can kind of do some different things there. Just a lot of different types of data security that you can kind of put up. Some of that stuff is actually things I was going to talk about in these bullets. The SIM solution, that is like Michael mentioned, it's going to bring all your logging that you have on your IT network and be able to look for things. This product has saved, I know, a couple of customers by being able to detect a hacker getting in. And we've been able to, as soon as we see something, it, alerts us. And then within hours, we've had instances where we got ransomware on one server. We were able to shut down that server, isolate it. We had a good backup from the night before. We were able to restore it within just a few hours, be back up and running. So those kind of things are good. We've had an instance where the other example about the email hack. They had hacked and set up an email relay. We were able to detect that. They set that up like one evening or at night, and then first thing in the morning we saw that, able to see it. Not that it was, it was just using bandwidth. It wasn't doing anything malicious to them, but being that they had access to the system, they could, start exploiting other things. So we contacted the customer, said, hey, this is what's going on, could potentially become, ransomware or whatever. So yeah, we actually figured out how they got in. It was an application that needed to be updated, a new update had come out like the week before, and they had exploited that. So so we were able to kind of shut that down, get the app updated, kind of get the server back up and running within hours again. So just kind of minimize the damage. So that was good. Endpoint protection and the endpoint detection response. Those things are very good, kind of very similar to the SIM solution, except it's for just the for your desktop and stuff. So that's good stuff. Backups are so important. Like the example where, hey, we detected something on the SIM, they got ransomware, we were able to isolate it, but we did a recovery from the backup. That was so important, just having a good backup so that they can get back up and running very quickly. So that's the thing. Like a lot of our clients, that have gotten ransomware, if we're doing the managed service with them and we're doing backups, we're getting them off site. A lot of times, we find it so quickly and they're able to restore it that we really never even have to look at, okay, hey, if we don't get this recovered, what's it going to be to, what are we going to pay the hacker or whatever? That just has never come into play just because we recover it within hours. So it's been good. Security assessment. This is just something to assess your situation, and every once in a while that needs to be done, just to make sure everything is in good shape. So, and if there's any issues, you want to know about those. Here's just kind of a quick overview of us, Clearwinds. Over 20 years in business. We have been doing things all over the US and internationally for the last 5 years. Just had a lot of growth. You know, we've been growing very rapidly and serve every industry. All of our engineers are certified and licensed. You know, anyway, so a lot of staff that can do a lot of different things. So some of the other areas besides security that we do work in, networking solutions, you know, anything in the data center, we've got engineers that know all this stuff in depth that can help out. We do offer a lot of cloud hosting and voice, you know, backups, voice, email, you know, variety of cloud offerings. Managed services, this is something that we do for a lot of clients, especially if they don't have an IT staff. We can be their IT staff. We do a lot of this managed services for someone that may have maybe just one or two guys that do that do IT, but they need the full staff. Like, hey, we've got, you know, a network engineer, we got a data center engineer, we got a database engineer, you know, that can help out, and then help desk, all the software to monitor and those kind of things, you know, come with that service. So something, you know, very important to a lot of our customers. The AV, that's audio visual. We do a lot of design and implementation of video conferencing systems and rooms and stuff like that. So a lot of cabling. So if you ever have a need for running any cable or anything in your office or anything, we do that. Device repair, that's, you know, physically fixing devices. So we do a lot of that. We have partnerships with all the major providers, you know, Dell, Cisco, Aruba, HP, just a lot of them. So if you ever need any equipment, we can provide that. We do have tier 3 data centers here in Birmingham and Nashville. So to get all your data off of your network, you know, for backups, or you need, you know, a hosting scenario, we can offer that. So anyway, just a lot of different things we can offer to you. So here's our contact information. You can get a hold of us at any time. I know Katie and Charlotte, they're going to make this available to you guys to look at, you know, and if you need to contact us. Clay Fuquay, he's on with us. He is a sales account executive, and he can definitely help you out and get you into the right place. Craig, he is our VP of sales. You know, myself and Michael, we've been talking with you, so feel free to reach out to any of us with any questions or with any needs. I guess at this point, we want to open it back up with questions. So if y'all have any questions, you can, I guess, just unmute and just ask your question at this point. If there are no questions, Charlotte, do you want to say a few words? I want to turn it back over to Charlotte.
Hey, thank you guys so much. Stan, Clay, Michael, Craig, they are outstanding. We have, again, both a professional relationship with them and really feel like they are the people that will be both on the reactive and proactive side, coming alongside of all of our clients and our prospects and our contacts. So please feel free to reach out to them. You can also reach out to us and we'll connect you with them. We are recording today, so if it's something that you feel like somebody else would benefit from, feel free to share it. We'll send out the slides from Clearwinds, and then we'll also send out the recording so that we can continue to access it and better protect the organizations that create our community. Thank you guys so much and have a great Wednesday.